I feel like there's kind of a process that brands go through when it comes to marketplace. And kind of the first step in that process is not really even being aware that it's a thing that they ought to think about. The second step in the process is not liking it because of the control that they don't have, right?
Yep.
If you don't know who these folks are that are selling your product, do you have any say over pricing? And do you have any say over customer experience and the product imagery and product information and all that?
Yep.
And so and then the third part tends to be a begrudging acceptance of the premises. And then finally, we see folks, and I would say that these are kind of the more advanced folks among marketplaces, the folks that are really trying to figure out how to harness it for their own benefit.
This is the E-commerce Braintrust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Braintrust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
So today on the podcast, we're playing an interview that I did with Ken Cassar from Slice Intelligence this week. And how I first got to know Ken was through the new retail news rag, Retail Wire, that we both contribute to. And Retail Wire puts on some really great webinars throughout the year. And this particular webinar, Ken was presenting on behalf of Slice Intelligence. It was called Ignore Marketplaces at Your Peril.
Ooh, very ominous.
Yeah, it was a cautionary tale that Ken told. So he was telling the audience a lot of data stories around how brands think that they're not on marketplaces, but they actually are, and their products are being sold by third parties. He dove a lot into the Nike story of how Nike was not a part of, was not selling on Amazon for a very long period of time for a lot of reasons related to counterfeiting and unauthorized sellers and things of that nature. So we talked a lot about that, and then I came onto the webinar at the end as a panelist to kind of do some hot takes on issues related to marketplaces. So that's how I got to know Ken, and we decided to record this episode together. And what I just sort of thinking back through what we talked about, what is kind of still shocking to me and what Ken deals with at Slice Intelligence on a daily basis is with very large brands, a lot of CPG brands, that a lot of brands still are ignoring Amazon or super reluctant to get involved because of a lot of perception issues, which in some cases are accurate and in other cases are not accurate. And what seems to also be just sort of some lack of education really about how Amazon works as a marketplace and as a wholesale sales channel.
I don't know how it's actually possible to ignore Amazon with how huge it is as an opportunity and just how much it's kind of threaded through everything that we talk about in terms of retail and e-commerce right now. It is kind of stunning to hear that it is an ignored presence for some people, for some brands.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we're biased. We work with brands every day to help them on Amazon. So
yeah, Amazon is a little bit a part of my life. So I guess I'm not the most objective view.
Yeah. We learned a lot, I guess, from listening to this interview and talking with Ken about the state of things right now. And there is still so much still shaking out in the industry when it comes to marketplaces. So before we get into the interview, I know, Julie, you raised a point around what is the definition of a marketplace and how in our previous episodes of this show and in the content that Bobsled Marketing puts out for our readers and clients, we may have a slightly different definition of marketplace and what Ken refers to as a marketplace.
Yeah, generally, again, because we're Amazon focused, and when we're talking about marketplace, we're using terminology like third-party sellers or seller central. And so I think just keeping that in mind as you're listening to the interview is probably a helpful thing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, let's get into it. So, yeah, I wanted to kick things off by learning a little bit about your background and how you came to Slice and a little bit about what you do at Slice Intelligence.
Sure. So Slice Intelligence has been around now since 2010. We were founded in Palo Alto, California, by sort of tech guys that had developed some machine learning technologies that allowed them to go through digital receipts and kind of make sense of things that don't necessarily order themselves toward making sense. And so they developed those technologies, and the plan was always that we would build up a big base of panelists and be a market research provider. And so in about 2013 or so, we raised a Series B round of financing and hired a bunch of market research people like me. I had been at Nielsen for 10 years, so I was looking for something sort of new and exciting and cutting edge and all that, and this really kind of fit the bill. So I've been with Slice now for about 4 years. I'm our thought leadership person, so I
That's quite a mantle to have.
I know, right? Yeah, it's one of those titles where you kind of tell your friends what it is, and you kind of regret ever telling them that's what you do.
And the unspoken rule is you can't refer to yourself as a thought leader, right? It's something that other people have to bestow upon you.
Yeah, exactly. And if I could think of a way to describe myself differently, I would be all over it. But over the course of time, we went from a modest-sized panel. We had a couple 100,000 people back in 2013, and by growing the base of people that used our applications, and those people allowed us to go into their email inboxes and grab their digital receipts, anonymize and aggregate those. And so over the course of time, we've built that to now more than 5 million people under measurement. And it's a pretty awesome number, and it's amazing how often you actually need all that sample. I kind of came from a world where we believe that a couple 100,000 people was plenty, but as soon as you want to get narrow, as soon as you don't want to just know whether people are buying laundry detergent online this quarter, but when you want to be able to slice it and dice it by demographic groups, by retailer, by brand, when you want to look at marketplace versus non-marketplace, you find that you really need all that sample.
Yeah. That makes sense. And how we got to know each other was through a Retail Wire webinar, which thank you for bringing me on for that. And listening to you talk about your methodology for generating insights for retailers and brands, I had no idea how you actually collect that information. So in preparing for the interview, it's actually an app that consumers use to figure out ways to save money, right? Like give alerts on low prices and things like that. That's how you get opt-ins from actual consumer data.
Yeah, well, there are actually a couple of different apps. You're thinking of the Slice app. Yes. Which is principally about helping people track their packages and just keep on top of their receipts so that an alert is delivered when something arrives on their doorstep. And there is some sort of cost savings functionality as well. The bigger source of our users, though, is from an app called Unroll Me, which is unroll. And it's a way of making your email inbox manageable. So you sign up for that, and you get a daily newsletter style summary of all your email. And so it's super, super useful. Yes. And it's kind of an exchange of value. So we build this pretty cool tool that allows us to, that makes consumers' lives easier, helps them to get control of their email inboxes, and in return, we're able to take that data, again, anonymize, aggregate it, and then provide macro level views of what consumers are buying online.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm a user of Unroll Me myself, so that makes a lot of sense. So you actually Slice is able to get into the inboxes of millions of consumers and see where they're shopping, what they're spending, what brands they're buying, how that's divided up across marketplaces versus brands' own e-commerce stores. So what I wanted to you sort of have all of this information at your fingertips and see a lot of trends emerging. So what I wanted to talk with you about today is Amazon, obviously, and the types of brands that you work with at Slice Intelligence that you're collecting this data for and giving them insights about what they should be doing with marketplaces. I'm really eager to learn what kind of, what you see those brands doing wrong. How can and should brands be leveraging analytics that you see as sort of low-hanging fruit for them? And that kind of topic, because I think that there's obviously a lot of information that is available to you that isn't available to maybe smaller brands or brands that are choosing to defer their online marketplace strategy and things like that.
Right. Yeah, and in online and e-commerce, it's kind of an interesting space because there's so much data out there that's available, especially if you're a retailer, right? Yeah. So if you think about the data that's available to you through your Google Analytics or your web analytics tool, it's pretty amazing. You're able to see that a particular person, and sometimes you know who the person is if you have a cookie on them and you've got that sort of lined up with customer data. In other cases, you might not know who they are, but at least you're able to dedupe the machine, and you're able to see the paths they go through. You know if they bought, if they didn't buy, and then over the course of time, you can string those purchases together, and it really is pretty amazing. The problem that retailers have oftentimes is that despite all the data they have that they are often drowning in, they don't have context. So they may know that their e-commerce business during the first half of the year is up 15% from the prior year, but they don't really have any knowledge of what's going on around them to help them understand whether that's good or bad. At 15%, am I growing half as quickly as my category, which means I'm losing, even though 15% seems like good growth. And then when you look at it from the perspective of a brand, right? So a company that ships pallets of stuff to a retailer that then sells it, they're really very blind when it comes to e-commerce. So they'll, a company like Procter & Gamble might know that they've shipped pallets to Amazon, but they get some reporting back from Amazon and from other retailers that they work with, but they don't have, again, that competitive context. They don't know whether they're winning or losing, whether the 18% growth that they saw in Amazon in category X is good or bad. They don't know who the consumers are, and so despite the fact that all that data is out there, we really we felt that there was a pretty significant need to help provide that context to folks. Yeah. One of the things that one of the forms of measurement that we've sort of invested in a lot lately is being able to separate purchases on retailers that own marketplaces, that sort of have their hybrid marketplaces, and where we're separating the first-party sales, where the retailer takes inventory of the product from third-party or marketplace sales, and it's really been very interesting. We used to just look at them as sort of one big aggregate mass, but over the course of time is that the data we were reporting to our clients was pretty significantly higher than the data that they were seeing from their own Amazon feeds. Right. And we couldn't quite figure out why that was until we realized, oh, wait, these marketplaces, we see that through our data, they are only getting reporting on their first-party sales. Right. And so the development of that marketplace tool was really it really kind of started with a QA effort. Now, what's been interesting, as we look at it, though, and as we've really kind of dug into the data, is how widely marketplace varies as a force in different categories across different products. There are some categories where half of sales go through marketplace, and there are other categories where marketplace is really is practically an inconsequential portion of their sales. And it's not a rule of thumb, though, that apparel is always high and electronics is always low and CPG is always high or low. It really does vary pretty widely depending upon the brand and depending upon kind of the broader environment.
Yep. Yeah, interesting. So with the brands, they were really kind of, they were surprised in a lot of cases that there was all of this third-party seller marketplace activity going on.
Yeah, it was certainly surprising to me. And I've been in the e-commerce space now since 1998, right? So I've been around the block a few times. And particularly when you look in the CPG category, I would never have guessed that marketplace was such a significant portion of sales. Yeah. And so now the questions, and so you'd asked about, kind of lessons learned and mistakes and all that. I feel like there's kind of a process that brands go through when it comes to marketplace. And kind of the first step in that process is not really even being aware that it's a thing that they ought to think about. Yeah. The second step in the process is not liking it because of the control that they don't have, right?
Yep.
If you don't know who these folks are that are selling your product, do you have any say over pricing? And do you have any say over
branding, customer experience?
Yeah, customer experience and the product imagery and product information and all that.
Yep.
And then the third part is, and then the next step tends to be a begrudging acceptance of the premises. And then finally, we see folks, and I would say that these are kind of the more advanced folks among marketplaces, the folks that are really trying to figure out how to harness it for their own benefit.
This sounds like, what is it, the 5 stages of grief?
Exactly. Fortunately, though, you don't have to. Someone doesn't have to die first in order to get into this.
And it can be. There is enormous potential, like you said. There's all these third-party marketplace sales already going on, and there's brands out there who think that they're not on Amazon, and they are, but they're just in a way that's completely uncontrolled and unmonitored by them. So someone is getting that sale, someone is able to purchase that product, and someone is making money off that transaction. So is that going to be you as the brand, and you can get more control over that and get more data and control the experience more? Or are you just going to kind of put your hands up and say, this is too hard, they shouldn't be doing that? Hey, Amazon's not going to come along and rescue you. They're not going to shut those third-party sellers down because they're offering a product that consumers want.
Yeah, and if you look at it from the perspective of the marketplace operators, the marketplaces are really pretty critical for them in rounding out their assortment.
Definitely.
When we looked at Nike, right, which is a really interesting case study, we found that that on Amazon there was no first-party relationship with Nike prior to, I think, July of 2017. However, Nike accounted for 45% of all of the sneakers sold on Amazon in that time period. And so clearly, the fact that there was no first-party relationship left a window open for different vendors to come in. Now, the other part of that story that's really interesting is ultimately Nike decided to work with them, but as a part of that, by work with them I mean sell directly, develop a first-party relationship. But as a part of that deal, Amazon agreed to more closely monitor the marketplace and specifically piracy, right? So fraudulent product, which of course is something that you would think that would be in everybody's interest to monitor anyway, because it's certainly not in Amazon's interest for consumers to have bad experiences buying products that turn out to not actually be Nike products.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Amazon's been getting a lot of heat in the press and from consumers when there is a counterfeiting issue on Amazon, and there's lots of different types of fraud that happen on Amazon. One is that you get fake sellers showing up, and they set up it's very easy to set up a seller account on Amazon. There's very little due diligence that they do up front to verify that you're an entity. You can be an individual. You can be anywhere in the world, basically. So what these sellers do, they set up a seller account. They list some products. They never have any inventory to begin with, and they make a few sales, and then they close down their seller account after they've already been paid by Amazon. So the customer never receives the order. And that's one type of fraud activity that's happening fairly frequently right now. And the other is just counterfeiting. So you have brands of all stripes, and we have clients that have this issue. We have a print company that they make sort of high-end home decor prints, and they had issues with counterfeiters on their product listings. And I actually ordered one of the products from one of these counterfeit sellers, and instead of a 30-inch art print, it was a print on a piece of tin metal. About the quarter of the size of what it should be. So this Chinese seller had basically taken an image of this print off the internet, put it on a piece of tin, and shipped it out. So it's very poor quality knockoffs going on. It's eroding the customer experience every way you look at it. So Amazon is definitely, they're making moves to clean things up across the board. But to go back to your point about Nike, that was really a landmark deal, because they haven't done that for any other brand.
Yeah. I was surprised that Amazon kind of admitted that they had the ability to at least to some degree, control what was going on in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of what we're seeing kind of in the media landscape, right? Where we've got Facebook and Twitter and folks that used to, kind of take their hands off the wheel and say, look, we can't be held accountable for awful things that people say and do and awful advertisements that people may run. And increasingly, they're realizing, I think just yesterday, Facebook announced it was going to hire another 1,000 people to monitor that content.
Oh, the ads.
And, Yeah. So so it's kind of, there seems to be kind of like this common, slowly emerging understanding amongst tech companies that they really have they have no choice but to try to understand and get control of some of the stuff that's going on in their networks. Yeah,
interesting. So what's one big opportunity that brands are not really executing on when it comes to marketplaces and using the data that they have access to or should have access to?
Yeah, I think that there are two big opportunities and for brands. The first is to look at some of the bigger marketplace merchants out there and try to reach out to those folks and treat them as smaller merchants and see whether there are opportunities to directly supply them and hopefully to try to control their pricing and imagery and stuff like that a little bit more.
So, for example, third-party sellers on Amazon?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so PharmaPacks, right, is a big merchant that typically operates as a third party merchant on marketplaces. They're coming up prominently enough in a lot of the data that we've looked at that to me they look like a retailer. They're a little bit different in that they don't have a destination brand that people typically go to. They tend to live on marketplaces. Why not think about those folks as potential merchants? The second opportunity is, I think, for brands to develop their own storefronts and sell their own product directly, especially when Amazon or other merchants aren't willing to carry the full assortment.
Right.
And so if I am Clorox and I want my customer to be able to buy every flavor and variant of bleach available.
There's flavors of bleach?
Probably. I'm sure that there's a cool winter breeze bleach and many, many different flavors of bleach. And but I think it's probably in their interest to see that broad assortment. And if Amazon isn't willing to carry it, and Amazon is looking to get more and more rational about what they're carrying, and if Amazon's not willing to carry it, I think that it's something that they want to look at themselves pretty closely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this has become more of a popular mode of being present on Amazon, what we call the hybrid model, where you have your first party relationship with an Amazon buyer and they might only be willing to carry your top 20% of SKUs. And it can become quite problematic when you have new SKUs to launch and there's no sales history. Then Amazon may be a little reluctant to stock those products until they see see the velocity. So in those cases, lots of brands find it helpful to have both be selling under both models.
Right. Yeah, and the and one thing that's interesting is, with certain brands where we've looked at their marketplace and their first party sales, we see that that it's very complementary. So so there may be brand X variant A, right? The Tide pods that may be selling really, really well on first party, where Tide liquid 32 ounce may be selling uniquely well in on marketplaces, making this up. And so armed with that data, look at everything that's happening in the marketplace, it gives Procter & Gamble the ability to go back to the buyer and say, look at all this opportunity that you're not capitalizing upon.
Okay, so something I love to do is look at future predictions, and being a thought leader, Ken, maybe you have some ideas around the future of marketplaces. Put a stake in the ground.
It's interesting. When I think about the future of marketplaces, I see these forces kind of like going back and forth. I think that there's a move toward legitimacy of marketplaces that is there to some degree today, but maybe not to the extent that it could be. And so, I think that we're going to see more legitimization of marketplaces, which is likely to make them grow.
As a sales channel?
Yeah, as a sales channel and as and also as a buying platform for consumers. When a consumer knows that they can buy something from the marketplace and it's not going to be fraudulent and it is going to be, warranty is going to be good, and there are all those things that a consumer might care about. When they know 100% of the time that's not going to be a problem, it adds legitimacy to the marketplace and makes the marketplace grow. And so my sense is that marketplace is going to grow as a share of overall sales because of growing legitimacy, but also because I think retailers are going to want to get smarter and smarter about the inventory that they're stocking. And so it's going to be more important that those marketplaces are there in order to sort of offer consumers the breadth of assortment that they expect when they buy online. I think the other big thing is, right now, when you kind of get into the market, when you kind of get into how marketplaces work, there's a lot of sort of price arbitrage, where, there are folks out there, marketplace providers out there whose offering prices are relatively high, and they're willing to sit out there with those high prices that only pop up on the screen when Amazon goes out of stock on the issue. And there's just a lot of, it kind of reminds me of, kind of the early days of sort of high frequency trading and stuff. There's a lot of arbitrage, and I have to think that over the course of time, that's going to be less of an issue. And although maybe I'm just being optimistic, I guess if we look at, Wall Street, the tail there would be that, arbitrage is going to be there. It's only going to grow with increases in computing power and all that.
Well, there's all different types of arbitrage opportunities. There's people and entities like Pharmapacks there's a great article that came out a while ago on Inc. about one of these marketplace providers who they had built their own algorithm to basically figure out which products to stock and at what price and how they would be able to get some incremental cents on the dollar from every sale. And it's a huge operation, tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And they're just selling toothpaste on Amazon, making a few cents off of each. So that's one way, that's one arbitrage opportunity right now. And then the other, which Amazon is ultimately engaging in, and this is an amazing data story, so I'm curious to hear your take on this. But so Amazon's got reams and reams of data across all these categories about what's selling well and where there might be gaps in the assortment, and they're developing their own private labels. So they've got, I don't know what the last count is, and they're as usual, hold their cards close to their chest here. They've got dozens of private labels at this point across fashion, home goods, bed linens, baby products, food, all this stuff. And it's pretty incredible to imagine all of the data that Amazon is collecting, possibly from brands that don't even know that they're on Amazon, and they're creating their own products that they're able to get more margin, differentiate a little bit differently, and continuing to feed that machine of assortment and selection. So they don't even really need brands anymore.
Yeah, and the thing is, they know what we're searching on as well. So it's not just that we're searching on coffee; it's that we're searching on Arabian dark bean, whatever.
Yep.
And so they it's one thing to know what people actually bought, but it's another thing when you know what they wanted to buy and what they actually bought. It really is a phenomenally powerful data set.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can understand some brands' hesitation for getting involved with Amazon, but to your point, the point that you made earlier, they're potentially on Amazon without having any sort of control or upside anyway. So you may as well better the devil you know.
Yeah.
All right, great. So what's the best place for listeners to follow Slice Intelligence or keep up with what you do, Ken?
There are a few different ways that you can sort of track the work that we do. On Twitter, you can follow Slice Intel, so at Slice Intel, or you can follow me. I tend to sort of put articles out on Twitter that I find that are interesting and sort of share them around, kind of a shortcut for those that don't want to have to read every trade pub out there. And then for folks that want to talk to one of us and sort of learn more about our services, an email to info@slice.com is always going to get a pretty quick response.
Great. Thanks for spending some time with me today. And yeah, I guess I'll talk to you soon, maybe on another webinar. Thought leader to thought leader.
That sounds great, and thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Great, thanks, Ken. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
So first of all, I want to thank Ken for coming on the Ecommerce Braintrust podcast, especially as a very new podcast on the scene. It's great to have someone of Ken's caliber, a self-defined thought leader.
I aspire to that in my professional journey. I aspire to one day be a thought leader. I like it.
So we think you're a thought leader, Ken. That's all that matters. So, it was very enlightening, especially because of Ken's work with very large brands. So, Julie, what did you take out of the interview today? What was of interest to you?
One of the things that I did find interesting was the description of brands coming to terms with Amazon. And how you said it sounds a lot like the 5 stages of grief. That was exactly my thought. And it is interesting. I observe that sometimes in our interactions with clients selling on Amazon, that at a certain point, Amazon can be mystifying and policies and actions taken, and at some point, there is acceptance that is reached that this is the reality of selling on Amazon. And it's the reality of, if you want to embrace this opportunity, this is what you need to navigate.
Yeah, 100%. The webinar that Ken and I did about ignoring marketplaces at your peril, which we'll link to in the show notes here, because it was a great piece of content. But I talked about this Prince Charming syndrome, where brands think that Amazon will come and rescue them. And that's not the case. And the whole Nike situation that we talked about, how Amazon sort of rolled out the red carpet in a way for Nike and said, we'll promise to clean everything up for you. You don't have to worry about it. Just please come and sell directly to us. That is just not the natural state on Amazon, and chances are that unless you are a particularly big brand, there isn't any special treatment that you're going to get from Amazon. You'll be treated the same way as everyone else. It's very difficult to get, in a lot of cases, to get some attention from even when you have a wholesale relationship with your buyer. This is something where brands really need to pick themselves up and be proactive rather than waiting to be rescued from an industry that's changing very rapidly.
Well, and not totally on the topic of the data collection that Slice Intelligence offers, but piggybacking off of that, Amazon's about the customer, and their goal is to provide the best experience for the customer possible. Yep. It's not really about supporting the vendors and the sellers. Yeah. So it's an unfortunate reality that I do think is part of the 5 stages that brands and sellers go through. And once you come to terms with it, then you can navigate it a little bit more objectively and productively as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking ownership. Yes.
Yeah, I was fascinated by the levels of data that they're able to collect and the context they're able to put around the levels of data around customer purchasing habits. Yeah. I like you, I have Unroll Me. And I had no idea that it was such a source of information in that way. I thought it was just helping me organize my inbox.
For free?
Yeah.
It was. It's been ages since I installed Unroll Me. I think at least 2 or 3 years, and so I forget what I thought at the time the monetization model was. But I admit I didn't think too long and hard about how they were making money.
No, I really didn't either. It's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exchange of value. I mean, they're able to get such vast quantities of data. And something that I really took away from talking with Ken as well is the benchmarking that it can give brands as well. So it's great to see that your sales are growing on Amazon year over year or month over month, and you're getting, you're making headway against your past performance. But a lot of brands do really want to understand, how does that compare to other competitors in their category, to the overall market. And so giving that competitive context is something that this kind of analytics solution provides.
Absolutely. I mean, data is only as good as the story that you can tell from it, from the information that you get from it. And so the analytics that this offers is really incredible.
Yeah. And something else that Ken explained arose from the analytics and the benchmarking was what we were saying at the beginning of the episode about first party versus third party, or as we sometimes refer to it, vendor versus seller, or sometimes as we refer to it, vendor versus marketplace. We should probably get a little bit more streamlined in how we refer to it, but the reality is that's how it's referred to all over the place. But that metric turned out to be particularly important for brands to learn that they might only be capturing X% of sales, and that marketplace sellers, and in a lot of cases, they're actually conducting some kind of price arbitrage. And knowing that Amazon will often run out of stock of some items, so they're just sitting around with their packet of Campbell's soup waiting for Amazon to go out of stock of that item, and then they're selling their soup packet for 2 or 3 times the price. That has a reputational impact for brands a lot of the time, because consumers often don't, I would say very rarely, understand that there's a difference between Amazon having its own inventory of a product and third-party sellers. And so they look at that hugely inflated packet of soup and they say, something's wrong here with the brand. And that has a flow-on effect reputationally for the brand. They may have no idea that that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that goes to one of our previous episodes about why brands more and more are trying to take greater control of their presence on Amazon, and cut out the middleman and kind of own their presence more and more.
Yep.
That exactly. is a real clear example of how the other sellers having control of sales can impact your brand awareness and your brand image in the mind of the consumers.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. This is very insightful. Again, want to thank Ken for coming on the show. And yeah, we got a real insight here, I think.
Yeah. They've got quite the pool of data. That's very interesting. This was a really insightful episode, and I'm glad that he came on.
Great. We'll wrap it up there and talk to you next week.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Carrie.